Hey everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Heads up, this is shorter than typical podcast. If you usually counted us for a good long hour of distraction while you're running or exercising, you might want to find last week's Intuitive Talks podcast. We sent it out through this channel, and they're actually kind of the two sides of an episode I wanted to put together, or a story I wanted to put together, looking at different types of robotic surgery. So last week, we talked to Charlie Dean and Oliver Wagner of Intuitive. We talked about their ION system, which is an endoluminal system, and it's used in lung biopsies and treatments. And it's really paving a way for new approaches to treat respiratory disease, which is fantastic. This week, I'm really excited to speak with Michael Friedrich. He is the CEO of Distalmotion. Distalmotion raised $90 million. We talked about it last week, the Newsmakers, from Revival Healthcare and 415 Capital. And Distalmotion, as Michael Friedrich will explain in the interview, has created a system called Dexter, which is for laparoscopic surgery. So this is not in the same area as you'll see Da Vinci. It's not in the same area as we'll someday see Hugo. It's definitely bringing robotic systems to places where they haven't been before. And in this case, as Michael Friedrich will explain, it's a system that's able to stay within the sterile surgical field. So surgeons can use it as they're working without having to move in and out of the surgical field. So it's an interesting take, very exciting company, and just an indication of where this sector is headed. So again, this particular Device Talks Weekly episode is shorter than most, but if you haven't yet listened to last week's Intuitive Talks episode, and it should be right there on your list of episodes, listen to this one and that one. That'll give you more than an hour of robotics talk. And I feel like we've delivered on our promise with that. So I know you'll enjoy this conversation. Chris Newmarker and I lose our minds a bit in the intro, but that's okay. I think we're both ready for spring. And finally, I did want to remind you, we'll talk a lot about the Device Talks Boston conference. It's coming up on May 10th and 11th. Registration is open. We continue to add keynotes. I was hoping to have another keynote speaker to announce on this podcast, but we'll get that announcement up on the website next week. I do have a keynote announcement for Minnesota, and you'll hear that in the podcast. So go to devicetalks.com to register for Device Talks Boston. And when you do, make sure you use the code DTW25. That stands for Device Talks Weekly 25, and you will save 25% off the registration. That's it. Time to start this episode. Let's go. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Good to be here, Tom. Doing well, man.
Great to have you here. It is cold. And do you have your cup of coffee, Chris?
I have my cup of coffee. You got a cup of coffee?
I got my cup. I was pouring my cup when I hopped on this call to do this with Chris, and Chris decided he needed his cup of coffee. So now we're both well caffeinated.
Yes, it remains below. I'm caffeinated. Yeah, I like this.
You're caffeinated?
It depends on the day. Yeah, some days might be an herbal tea day in the afternoon, but this isn't. Well, you can tell how much I drink my herbal tea, though, because I think I finally got through the apple cinnamon tea just last week. Which you buy apple cinnamon tea maybe in September or so. I'm finally we're finally getting done with that.
Don't worry, folks. We're not going to get into a pumpkin tea discussion.
No. Tom, we can't. We had a pumpkin embargo. No.
Every once in a while, I try the whole tea thing. I'll be like Terry Francona. I'll have a green tea instead of coffee. Yeah. It'll sharpen my mind and all that stuff. And it takes for a day. And I'm like, no, this can't do this. I do have tea at night though. No, right? Because I used to have decaf right before, while watching TV at night. Now I go with tea.
Do you sleepy time? Do you go the sleepy time route? Sleepy time extra?
I don't. I didn't realize there was a sleepy time extra. I'll have to look into that.
I think Celestial Seasoning says it has valerium in it. It was used by the ancient Romans. I'm this is some serious stuff here.
The Romans. Those people could sleep. Those Romans.
That's right.
Oh, dear God. Folks, just stop listening to this podcast right now. It's
Sleep
all right.
like you conquered Gaul again. What was it that Caesar said?
I was going to make a Carthage joke.
I saw, I slept.
Yeah, that's right. I had a sleepy time extra tea and went to sleep. All right. So we have our coffees. Dear God.
That was great.
All right. So we're well caffeinated, or I'm well caffeinated. I don't have caffeine, but I'm caffeinated.
I'm sure the listeners can tell now.
Yeah, we are gonna get a ban, a coffee ban. Guys, please, no more pumpkin talk.
Paul Grand doesn't need to slow down his speed up his audio. This one,
That's right, Paul. Come on, Paul. How do we sound now, Paul? Keep it at 1x, everybody. 1x. You're gonna miss some of this.
Right.
This genius coming.
That's right.
From these
There's
two.
art going on here, people. Art.
Oh God. Let's just roll into the Newmarkets Newsmakers. This has turned into a mess. Chris, what is number 5 on the Newmarkets Newsmakers?
Number 5 on the list, we've got Boston Scientific. Shares took a hit this week. Because they issued guidance for the first quarter in 2022 that was below the consensus forecast. But I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of par for the course. It's just been the last week or two has just been a tough time for, with a lot of these earnings reports. I mean, there's supply chain problems, there's Omicron battering procedures, there's, even, talk about like problems with hospital staff shortages, and that makes it harder for, more procedures to happen. So yeah, it's, fingers crossed. This is just a bump in the road for Boston Scientific, and the analysts had different takes on it. I saw BTIG analysts were more saying that they're saying like that the margin cut that Boston Scientific was doing was prudent in the current environment. While I saw Mike Madsen at Needham and Company was saying that he thought the Boston Scientific was going to face some competitive headwinds, including from Abbott. So they were, like he was a little less optimistic, but still, it's just, it's just another example of just, that it's been a last week or two is, overall kind of a rocky, time for earnings reports.
It's not business as usual for medical device companies by any means. So hopefully we'll be emerging that in the second quarter, and I'll try to make a connection for each of the new markers. So Boston Scientific. I'm happy to report that CEO Mike Mahoney will be speaking at DeviceTalks Boston. I'll be interviewing him at DeviceTalks Boston on May 10th. So,
woohoo!
Yep, that'll be great. So we'll ask Mike about emerging from the pandemic lockdown. I was going to say post-pandemic, emerging from COVID, but we know that that's not likely to happen. That COVID is going to be around for a little bit. But moving on.
Yes.
No COVID talk. Moving on to number 4 on the Newmarkets Newsmakers.
Number 4, Medtronic performed their first procedure with the Hugo surgical robot in Europe. Performed in Belgium. So it continues to roll along. It received a CE mark approval for urologic and gynecologic procedures in October 2021. We've reported before that Medtronic's kind of seems to be taking like a Europe first strategy. Like they thought there was less adoption of surgical robotics in Europe than in the US. So it gives them kind of to get in there and expand the Hugo in Europe, and then kind of get back over here and take on Intuitive here in the United States. So competition is heating up.
It's coming. And this is an easy connection. Bob White, the Executive Vice President and President of Medical Surgical Portfolio for Medtronic, and Megan Rosengarten, the President of Surgical Robotics at Medtronic, will be at DeviceTalks Boston. And
this is almost like a game.
This is fun, right?
Hey, we have somebody talking at a DeviceTalks.
That's right.
Great.
This is a current conference, people, and we did not orchestrate this. And there'll also maybe be a special guest at DeviceTalks Boston. Trying to lock that one down. Hopefully we can announce that in a couple of weeks. So
that's exciting.
Yes, it is. It is. Go to DeviceTalks.com to register. And use the code. I forgot to mention the code. Use the code DTW25, DeviceTalks Weekly, DTW25, to save 25% off the cost of registration. So,
you got to be there or be square.
Absolutely. Do not be square, people. You do not
That's
want to
right.
be square.
Don't want to be a square.
Chris Newmarker, what is number 3 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers?
Number 3 on the list, we have BD acquiring flow cytometry solution developer. Oh, goodness. Let's see if I can pronounce this. Cydognos. Apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly, but it's a...
Cytognos.
Yes.
Cydognos. That's where I'd go with.
Financial terms not disclosed, but a good quote about why this deal is important was they had a top executive at BD saying that, as the understanding and treatment of cancer evolves and improves, the importance of monitoring post-remission cancer survivors has become paramount to improve patient outcomes. So it's an acquisition. We've seen a growing number of medical device companies increasingly becoming like disease, moving beyond from just being manufacturers to like doing disease treatment. And this seems to be like BD, doing a nice tuck-in acquisition to get more into this trend themselves.
Absolutely. And of course, we had Dave Hickey and Brooke Story from BD on the podcast last week. And I'm happy to say that this isn't even up on the website yet, but CEO Tom Poland will be a keynote speaker at DeviceTalks Minnesota.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So that'll be a lot of fun. And we may have, I'm this close to announcing a senior executive from BD as a keynote in Boston. So cool stuff. This is great.
Awesome. This is great.
Thanks for all these opportunities to plug the conference, Chris Newmark.
Well, let's see if there's another. Let's see if the next one will give you a chance. This is great. It's almost like a game. Like they're all 5. Let's see if we can get all 5 here. So number 2 on the list, Hologic. Beat the street with first quarter earnings. A nice bright spot. And like a tough earnings season. And CEO Steve McMillan was saying, like, even excluding like the COVID-19 testing, which had really strong demand, they had robust revenue growth across all their franchises. So just really strong earnings report for Hologic, and as they're doing really well, they're announcing they're doing a national direct-to-consumer advertising campaign. And you know what you have to do when you go super big on your marketing.
Where do you go when you need to go super big on your marketing, Chris Newmarker?
You got to do the Super Bowl ad.
Of course, that's super.
Super Bowl ad.
And what will their Super Bowl ad look like?
It looks like they're going to have Mary J. Blige in it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Going to launch at the Super Bowl, run through the Winter Olympics. So.
We will be looking for that. And we will have Mary J. Blige at DeviceTalks. No, we won't have Mary J. Blige.
Wow. You blew my mind.
I think my streak's over. Oh, no. I mean, we certainly have had Steve McMillan on the podcast, and I know we'll have Hologic folks at DeviceTalks Boston. But
there you go.
No big announcements right now.
There.
Yeah. All right. So what is the big number 1 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers list, Chris?
Number 1 on the list, we just had a really nice, feature story from our associate editor, Sean Hooley, that ran in full on drug delivery business news, where he talked to Dr. Frank Kaufman at Senseonics, basically about what's next. I mean, they're moving forward with their 180-day GM device, with expectations we're going to get FDA approval, coming soon. And he was speaking with her about, hey, so what's next in the future? And it was, she's saying, that she's kind of saying, hey, what could it be better in the future if we could eventually get to the point where we have like a 1-year implantable CGM? I mean, wouldn't that be just amazing for some people with diabetes, that you could get something implanted for a year? Just tracks your glucose levels.
That would be fantastic. Now, a lot of interesting and great diabetes news recently. Of course, we had FDA approval of Insulet's Omnipod 5 recently, and we will have Dr. Fran Kaufman, as well as folks from Dexcom and Bigfoot, on the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast in 2 weeks. Those are interviews that Sean Hooley did. Yeah, and we'll have an entire episode dedicated to diabetes. And going back to the conferences, Insulet CEO Shacey Petrovic will be a keynote guest at DeviceTalks Boston. So
that's awesome.
Exactly.
And that's kind of exciting too. They can read, the article right now, like, and get an idea of, some of the things Sean heard in that interview. But then they can, we'll have this DeviceTalks, weekly coming up in just, 2 weeks, where they get to actually just hear the interview, glean even more from it.
It's multimedia. You can read it with your eyes, and then you can hear it with your ears, and then you can experience it at DeviceTalks Boston. We are we are just like this whole multimedia, multi-dimensional experience. We're the multiverse.
When are we going to get the DeviceTalks chip where I can just get it like downloaded in my brain, like information, medtech information? I don't want that, by the way, but I am just
I was going to make a vaccine joke, but I do not want to. I do not want to add to the misinformation out there or the disinformation out there. So no chips are in the works here at Device. We are.
Bill Gates is not helping us out with anything. We're fine.
No, we are good. Hey folks, Tom again. Before we start this interview, I wanted to let you know that Device Talks Tuesdays is back. Starting at 4 p.m. this Tuesday, our topic is how new delivery systems are enabling advanced structural heart therapies. Our sponsor is Spectrum Plastics Group. Our panel is fantastic and familiar. We'll hear from Santosh Prabhu. He is a divisional vice president of product development at Abbott Structural Heart. He's been on the podcast. We'll hear from Stan Rowe, CEO of NXT Biomedical, former CEO of Percutaneous Valve Technologies. He was on the podcast just a few months ago, and they'll combine their voices and insights with Mike Schultz. Mike is the vice president of innovation and development at Spectrum Plastics Group. We'll talk about the new procedures that are driving design. We'll talk about how physicians' transcatheter experiences have changed. Lots to discuss. Find out the entire list of questions and issues we'll talk about. Go to DeviceTalks.com. Under the Device Talks Tuesdays tab, you can read the entire description, and of course, you can register. It is free. It'll be live at 4 p.m. where you can participate in the question and answer. Or, of course, you can listen to it on demand, and even on demand, you can ask questions, and we'll get those to the right people. So go to DeviceTalks.com, sign up for this first episode of Device Talks Tuesdays. We'll have another episode the week after that and the week after that. So Device Talks Tuesdays is back. Register at DeviceTalks.com. Well, Michael Friedrich, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So I'm eager to understand Distalmotion's story. It's certainly a unique approach to surgical robotics, but as always, we'd love to find out about your story. What was your first move into medtech? I understand, was it starting a company? Is that how you became involved?
Yeah, that's correct. I studied engineering at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology here in Lausanne, in the French part of Switzerland. And after my studies, I got the opportunity to become the founder of a first medical device venture in the area of blood flow imaging. We developed a camera to look at blood flow non-invasively. We got that product to CE mark through FDA clearance, had initial sales, and later sold it to Novadac, which is now part of Stryker. And that was my first experience in medical devices.
Did you go into engineering with medtech in mind, or did it just sort of all come together?
It all came together. I always was interested in also the biological life science part of it. And then it kind of was a natural move.
Interesting. So how then did Distalmotion become available to you, part of your life? What got you involved with this company?
So after my exit of the previous venture, I was looking for a new challenge. I knew that I was not going to stick around with the acquirer. And I was looking around on site, on campus for new companies, and got to know the founder team at Distalmotion, which at the time was 1 year old. They had done a small first seed financing round, and they were looking to raise capital. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting what you guys are doing. Let me bring in the money that I've just earned, and let me bring in the money that my investors have just earned, and join you." And that is how I got to join the team.
That's funny. It's a coincidence. I'm not sure of the timing exactly, but Stryker would have just purchased Mako around that same time, of course, giving surgical robotics a little boost. And then you, at the same time, or nearly the same time, found your own surgical robotics opportunity. So it's funny how things work out.
Yeah.
So tell us about Distalmotion. What is it that's unique from other surgical robotics companies?
Ultimately, put the surgeon at the center of OR again. With traditional robotic solutions, the surgeon must leave the sterile field. He or she must be sitting in a console that is not scrubbed in and is kind of forced to do the entire surgery robotically. And while that has kicked off the robotic segment in general surgery, urology, and gynecology, certainly also has shown the limitations of robotic surgery, because the clearly clinical data shows that robotics is great for suturing, it's great for dissection, it's great to work in confined spaces. But there are other parts of the procedure where using laparoscopic instruments such as vessel seal devices or staplers is actually much better when done laparoscopically. And we realized that this ability to switch was missing. And that was ultimately the starting point of Distalmotion.
So that is the thesis. Talk a bit about the technology. The system is called Dexter, correct?
Indeed, Dexter, being very focused on dexterity, precision, giving the surgeon the opportunity to use robotic suturing, robotic dissection, robotic articulation of the instruments, robotic ergonomics, and robotic endoscope control, which are the true benefits of robotics, all while staying scrubbed in and all while being able to switch back to the table within less than 15 seconds. And that is a claim that is not just a claim that is on paper, but that's a claim that works in real life surgery. And that is something that really empowers surgeons, because it gives them the ability to choose the best tool for each part of the surgery. And for some parts, for some of the complex parts of the surgery, this is Dexter with the robotic capabilities. And for other parts of the surgery, clearly laparoscopic instruments are superior from a clinical perspective, but also from a time perspective and from an economic perspective.
Talk a bit about, if you would describe the system. We're on a Zoom call. You're one of the first people I've interviewed who actually had the system we're talking about right behind him. So I've been able to see what it looks like. But for our listeners who unfortunately can't see this video, tell us a bit about how Dexter is arranged.
Yeah, you have a surgeon console, which is an open console with two hand controls mounted on two master arms that capture the surgeon's hand and wrist movements of the left and right hand. It's a very non-intrusive small console. That is the first unit. And then you have two patient carts, each carrying one disposable instrument, fully articulated disposable instrument. Those patient carts are standing around the table, depending on the trocar position, to make sure that the robotic instrument can be held, but also at the same time guaranteeing access and real estate for the surgeon, as well as the assistant to continue operating at the table. And then you have a third unit, which is a very small bed rail clipped endoscope control arm, which allows the surgeon seated at the console to also direct the endoscope in the orientation direction of his or her choice.
And by the looks of it, the size of the unit is to stand about maybe 5 feet tall. I don't know if I'm having trouble comparing it to something else someone might be familiar with, but what's the size?
Both of those carts, and I wouldn't know what feet are in Europe.
As soon as I said that, I'm like, damn it, I don't know what it is in meters. So let's go by meters. People will figure it out.
Let's maybe use another comparable. Each of the patient cart has the size of a shorter person. I'm kind of average height. It reaches my chin, so it's easy to see across it. What is that? Maybe 2.5 feet times 2.5 feet of a footprint, so rather small. Those are the two patient carts standing around the table. And I guess the console is, it doesn't go above my shoulders. It's very low profile, and it maybe has the table of a small single person desk. It's very compact.
Yeah, no, it does look like a single person's desk. Although in my mind, I was at an arcade with my sons yesterday, and it kind of reminded me of one of those little motorcycle games where you got your hands on the handles of the handlebar, but you're not sitting on a bike, of course, but that sort of size. So how does this work with other surgical robotic systems? Is this meant to be something that will be used by those who can't use those other systems, or is it meant to be used by those who already have them and want this as well?
It's meant to be used by the laparoscopic surgeons, which are the majority of the surgeons in the specialties we are in. Laparoscopic surgeons that who already have basic training in performing minimally invasive care, that want to remain scrubbed in, and that want to get their hands on robotic capabilities to simplify the complex tasks. This is maybe in contrast to where traditional robotic systems have had their initial success, where they were targeting surgeons with no laparoscopy training, with only open surgery training, and we're helping those surgeons to perform minimally invasive care. We go into, again, those ORs where surgeons already know how to perform minimally invasive care, but want to improve their precision and surgical capabilities.
You have CE mark currently. What is your status in the US?
So we are working on our US approval. We have obtained the CE mark a bit more than a year ago. We've gone through initial clinical use and commercial use in Europe in 2021. We are continuing to expand on our commercial footprint here in Europe. And as part of that, we are also working on obtaining our US FDA approval to then get clearance to enter the US.
What are the economics of this system? Can you share a price, and can you identify sort of what the profile of the institution that this might be economically attractive to?
So Dexter is really a pragmatic solution. It only has those features in it that are really required. It doesn't have any unnecessary gadgets. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, it is substantially less expensive than those fully robotic solutions where the surgeon is supposed to do everything robotically. And as a result of that, indeed addresses one of a significant economic adoption barrier that exists today with existing solutions and also essentially all the new incumbents, where robotics is too expensive, irrespectively of how big the hospital is. And by being able to simplify to focus on the essentials, we can get the solution to an affordable price point where it doesn't only make sense for large university hospitals and the dominant private hospitals, but where it can then go much, much broader into mid-size hospitals and even into peripheral clinics, because it doesn't have any unnecessary function in it.
And the tools that are used by the robotic system, do you develop your own staplers, or do you work with existing staplers from other companies? Are you selling both the razors and the razor blades, so to speak, or what is the model?
We have a razor blade model, but more on in the sense that our instruments are single use. Mm-hmm. Staplers, clip appliers, certain ligashure and advanced vessel sealing instruments are meant to be used from the established J&J, Medtronic brands, because those are the ones that are clinically superior. Mm-hmm. And because Dexter allows the surgeon to remain scrubbed in and to switch, they can use those staplers that they already trust. It does not make any clinical sense whatsoever to deploy stapling technologies onto a robotic system. It just adds cost and workflow cumbersomeness, which none of the laparoscopic surgeons really sees value in. And so that is not part of our offering. But our instruments are proprietary designs. They're fully articulated. They have the full robotic capabilities, but they focus on the suturing and the various dissection tasks where robotics really provides value.
You mentioned that you found the company on campus, but what is the origin of the technology? Who first developed it? Who did you run into to offer to commit your resources to their technologies?
It was started by a mechanical engineer, PhD, who developed a purely mechanical telemanipulator at the time. It's a purely mechanical system to replicate the 7 degrees of the surgeon's hand movements into the patient, which is essentially what a robotic system does. And what really intrigued me was the completely, and no pun intended, completely counterintuitive approach. Instead of just going out there and saying, okay, there's a robot out there, let's try to match all the features. The founders, they came in with the complete opposite approach. They said, what's the bare minimum that is truly relevant clinically, all knowing that it would have downstream also huge cost benefits, but it's really on a what matters type approach. And I really like that way of thinking. This obviously then, with these mechanical systems, we have been in clinical use in 2015 and 16 as part of the co-development of Dexter. We then learned over time that purely mechanical has its limitation as well. And so we started to robotize or motorize it starting 2017. And that is ultimately where really Dexter was born. But we have been in clinical use since 2015 and have had more than 60 surgical teams from all across Europe that have been part of that journey to define that novel category of robotic surgery.
The ability to remain in the sterile field, if you wouldn't mind sort of going into that a bit further. I guess it's something I hadn't really thought much about when discussing surgical robotic systems, that the surgeons have to move from one field, from a sterile to a non-sterile field. How is it done with other systems, and how is that done differently than with Dexter and Distalmotion?
So you need a number of ingredients in order to enable the switch. The first one is that your surgeon console must remain sterile at all times. And that is not just a simple task of putting a sterile plastic bag over the master arms because no surgeon wants to operate a tool through a sterile drape. So we've designed our proprietary technology to make the handles reusable, to keep them to keep that great haptic experience of using a normal surgical instrument while remaining sterile.
Mm-hmm.
Then another ingredient is that the console must be really open. The surgeon wants to be able to know and see what is happening at the table so that he or she can judge at all times whether there is a clinical need to go back to the patient because of the procedure step, whether an assistant has an issue and needs guidance, so the surgeon can quickly stand up and go there and support. And particularly when you go into training institutions, that is extremely appreciated because it's part of the curriculum to educate youngsters into performing surgery, and you want to be with them at the table to help them. And then I guess another component that is super important is that the way you can fold the robotic arms away so that you can again redeploy them super quickly. And the way we've designed our arms is that they fall away from the surgeon while remaining fully aligned with the incision, so that the arm always keeps the referential to the trocar and the insertion point when switching between holding an instrument and being in standby laparoscopy mode. And that then also has an implication on where you place your patient cards, because you want your patient cards to be placed on the opposite side of the table, where neither the surgeon nor the assistant nor the scrub nurse nor anesthesia is standing. And that requires a very unique arm design, because if you're standing in the way of any one of those aforementioned surgical stakeholders, then you're disrupting a workflow and you're creating pain. So it really is a concept that has implications on many aspects of console design, but then also on the way patient cards and the robotic arms are designed. We for example, don't attach to the trocar. The instrument arm is not mechanically connected to the trocar like traditional solutions, which allows for a rapid reuse of those existing trocars using laparoscopic instruments. There's a large number of design implications when you decide to go hybrid, when you decide to go on demand.
With the other systems out there, explain to me, if you would, the workflow of a surgeon who has to move in and out of the sterile field. Is it a back and forth sort of thing, or is it either or? How does that typically work with other systems?
In other systems, it depends on first of all, it depends on the procedure. It depends on the surgical team. Some surgical teams have highly trained assistants that are equally good as the surgeon that can fire a stapler, but that is, or a LigaSure device, but that is really a tiny minority. In most cases, what it implies is that the surgeon stands up leaves the console, needs to go and scrub in, which takes a few minutes. And then the robotic arms need to be removed. In some device designs, cards even have to be pushed aside. So that's an extra step of rolling the cards out of the area where the surgeon needs to stand in order to access the trocars. And so just explaining it to you or summarizing it to you takes more time than it takes for Dexter surgeons to switch.
That's great. And then just finally, I understand you've raised some capital recently. Talk to us a bit about the round. How much have you raised? How long were you out there? Curious as to what the process was like. If you can give me an indication of the demand for surgical robotic companies. I mean, obviously they've been raising a lot of capital. They did raise a lot of capital last year. What was the environment like for fundraising?
We're super excited that we have been able to close a $90 million Series E financing round, which was led by Revival Healthcare Capital out of Texas, out of Austin, and joined by a European fund, 415 Capital, as well as existing investors. And for us, it was in the selection of the investors, it was extremely important to not only get capital, but to get company builders and operators and a team of board members and advisors on board that really intimately know what it takes to build a company, to launch a highly complex product, which a robotic system is, and to scale that globally. And we are super happy that with Revival and 415, we've been able to attract this type of talent to the team. So we more see it as an expansion of the team with the upside of a cash injection than the other way around, in a sense that finding money is one thing, but if you find money that doesn't really know what it takes to build a business, you pay a very high price very quickly after the round.
Did you have interest from, I'm not looking to have you denigrate other investors, but was there a lot of interest for the company? Did you have a lot of other options, a lot of other term sheets that you could have gone after?
What is becoming more and more clear is that this novel category of robotic surgery that we are pioneering really creates a new segment. It took a while to demonstrate that existing players have missed out on a certain perspective of the market. That's no doubt. It required also time to develop the CE mark product to demonstrate the credibility that we are able to deliver as a relatively, nevertheless, young European, smaller European venture to do that. But I think the success now demonstrates that we have taken the right decisions. And this is not only extremely resonating with clinicians, with laparoscopic surgeons and the C-suite of hospitals, but also now being understood by the investment community that this really is an important segment that currently is not addressed.
So looking forward, short term, what are your to-do list with this capital now in place? What is your first objective and your second? And how will this capital be part of that?
So ultimately, this capital allows us to expand on our commercial activities, on our clinical activities in Europe, in key European markets where we are commercial, and at the same time, it allows us to secure the entry ticket to the US through the FDA approval process. And as part of that, it really, or in that sense, it really helps us to accelerate our market entry now that we have successful real-life clinical and commercial experience and have been able to show that the product delivers on its expectations.
Long term, what do you see Distalmotion's future looking like? Is this the kind of company that you can build into a larger publicly traded company that has multiple products, robotic or not, in the medical device space? Or is this more something that would fit into a larger medical device company?
I would say without the perspective of it being able to walk and run standalone through the entire journey, reputable investors such as Revival would not have invested into us. And so when we look at the market opportunity ahead of us in Europe and the US combined, there's about 10 million surgeries every year only in general surgery, gynae, and urology, where Dexter is the right solution. And that is about 8 times more than the procedure volume of Intuitive today. So there is definitely a great segment ahead of us. And that is what is exciting about this journey.
Are there other companies that are going after this space as well? Yours is the first that I heard of. I'll admit that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we are not aware of any other solution. We really are the pioneers in that space.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right, terrific. Well, I'm glad we had the opportunity to talk. Thank you for sharing Distalmotion's story, and thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tom, for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
All right, well, that is a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. Chris Newmarker, where are you out there on the social media?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a new marker. I'm on Twitter at Newmarker. Always excited to find out about new things.
That's great. I wish we had Paul here, Paul Grant here to give our information. He did such a good job last week. I am on Twitter at MedTechTom. I'm on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, Salemi. Yes, please do connect with us. And please do share this podcast. Lots more folks are sharing the podcast on LinkedIn. I'm very grateful.
Follow, subscribe.
Follow, subscribe, share this episode on your social media channels. And please do tag Chris, myself, and our other staff members at DeviceTalks and Mass Device, Sean Hooley and Danielle Kirsch and Jim Hammerend, and of course, Brian Bunce. So connect with us all on social media and follow our pages, right? Mass Device and DeviceTalks on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Follow our pages. Sign up for newsletters.
Yeah. Lots going on here. We can keep you up to date on the news in the medtech industry. So
wow your friends with your medical device industry knowledge.
That's right. Where did you hear that? Well,
I know we're starting to sound like we're on PBS. Wow, and if you give a donation to us, $100 donation, you get the DeviceTalks tote bag.
just call the phone number at the bottom of your podcast screen.
That's right.
Our operators are standing by. So, oh boy! And please do subscribe, follow, and we are on Apple and Amazon and all the major podcast channels. So please do subscribe and have these podcasts sent directly to you. And of course, we have our other podcasts as well that will also be sent directly to you. So please do subscribe or go to DeviceTalks.com to find them all. All right. That is a wrap. Chris Newmarker, great job. Thanks for doing this today. Thanks for the laughs.
Anytime. We'll try 2 cups of coffee next time.
I don't think so. Thanks for listening, everybody. Join us next week. We'll have another great episode of the Device Talks Weekly Podcast waiting for you.
Take care, everybody. Stay healthy.